every time I see an attractive woman, I'm gonna feel the impulse to drop everything and look at her? Or can I train myself out of it?
Two things. It's a decision you have to make, and then it comes to the practice and the training. First of all, you have to decide that you don't want to be this same person who loses control over himself the moment he senses female body. And then you have to practice. Merely deciding won't take you far. So one has to put in effort, one has to be disciplined, and then one has to be patient to bear a lot of defeats, because the body is a thing very, very old. Your resolution has happened just now. The body is 40 lakh years old, and 4 hours back you resolved that you will no more salivate at women. And the body has been salivating at other bodies since 4 million years. So it will take some discipline and practice to tell the body who's the boss.
In this sense, aren't men worse off in a sense? Sexually, we always see that men are more.
Obviously. See, for both genders to survive, both of them have to have certain advantages. If you have more physical strength and such things, the woman has more self-control. Right? Ever seen a woman scratching her stuff in public? Ever seen that? Though her systems are more complex than yours. And she might be on her periods, but have you ever found herself doing the kind of awkward things that men do? Always fiddling. Scratching, fingering. There is self-control.
Even things like nose picking.
Nose picking and many other things. We have our sessions, right? Sometimes they run for 4 hours, 6 hours straight. And I'm at the pole position to observe what's going on in the audience. In general, if you measure and compile the statistics, men are far more likely to visit the loo 2 times, 3 times in a matter of 4 hours, 6 hours. Just don't have that physical discipline to stay put. Women, they have been told, please keep sitting. Acharya ji doesn't like disturbance, and they'll keep sitting. They too have bladders, but they have self-control. Not that no woman gets up to visit the loo, but the ratio is smaller case of women. So even they have their advantages, otherwise they wouldn't have survived till now. Otherwise they would have been totally defeated and exploited and all those things, and that's against the nature of consciousness. Remember the principle of duality. The exploiter and the exploited are the same. If you are exploiting somebody, the one being exploited is definitely turning around and exploiting you back in some other sense. You can't enslave somebody without yourself being enslaved. So even if we admit that men have been unfair and vile to women all along, we'll have to then admit how women have been avenging themselves on the men. There are no victims because everybody is a victim. You do not live rightly and you do not have the right relationship with the other. It's not merely an injustice to the other. First of all, it's an injustice to yourself. Though the injustice to other might be gross and very visible because you slapped the other one, the fingers are imprinted on the cheek, it's very visible, you slapped the other one. The event has been recorded on camera. But an equal violence has happened to the exploiter as well. But this violence won't be captured on the camera. This violence is existential. The law of karma is very clear. Your deeds get the return that they deserve instantaneously. If you are not doing right things to others, something very wrong is happening to you that very moment.
But that may not be a gross.
But that may not be visible. It happens, but it's not visible. Why is it not visible? Because we are not subtle enough to perceive it. Had we been subtle enough, first of all, we wouldn't have indulged in the kind of wrongdoing we did. So the result of that wrongdoing that falls upon us is not perceived by us, but the result has come and the suffering has taken place, irrespective of whether you know of it or not.
How am I supposed to believe that?
Think of the mask. Think of the mask. You're supposed to wear the mask. You didn't. You got infected. Do you immediately come to know of it? No. That's how it happens. But what has happened has happened. What has happened has happened. But we are not sensitive enough to know that something disastrous has happened. You have been infected. You will come to know of it maybe 2 weeks later.
So can you develop the subtlety to even to acknowledge or to sense that you've been infected?
You can develop the remembrance to never forget this law of duality, the law of karma. You may never be able to exactly know how the consequences are hitting you. That may never be possible. But to remember that the consequences will definitely hit you, irrespective of whether you know or not, that is possible. If we insist that we will be good only if we know that our bad deeds have bad returns, then being good will be very difficult, because you will not always be able to know or ascertain the results of your actions. Definitely not instantaneously. You stole something and ate it, right? The gross experience has been of fulfillment. If you insist on saying that I will admit that my action has been wrong only if yields me the wrong consequence instantaneously, then this demand will never be met. Because even a stolen sweet is sweet to eat. However you can do is remember, constant remembrance. The center I act from is the center that receives the fruit of the action. The center I act from will be reinforced by the result of the action, irrespective of whether I come to know or not. I may come to know, I may not come to know. And that's not very difficult, right? Is it? You put your foot on the accelerator. Do you really visibly see what's happening in the engine? But you know the principle. You know the principle, and that suffices for you. Similarly, here, remember the principle of duality. Remember the law of karma.
But how do I know this principle really works? So in the engine example,
Self-observation. How are you when you are doing something despicable to the other? It's easier than observing the engine. The engine is somewhere outside of you. How are you when you are plotting to stab him in the back? How are you? How are you? Do you like yourself in that moment?
no, there's tenseness,
That's what.
fear.
That's what. And if the action is coming from there, neither the action can be good nor its results. You have to ask yourself, where is my thing coming from? It will have corresponding results.
Acharya, taking the example of a typical patriarchal family, I mean, feminism has made it popular knowledge that women have been subjugated and all of that. But the subjugator, the patriarch, the father, I mean, there are ways in which that man also suffers.
That's what, and therefore the exploiter is not the man, the exploiter is the enemy of spirituality. Now that turns the tables. We are trying to popularize a narrative in which the patriarch is the exploiter. The exploiter is the perpetrator of ignorance, not the patriarch. Was the patriarch born a patriarch? Both the exploiter and the exploited are actually exploited.
Both are playing roles which have been taught.
In their ignorance, they have been taught to play these roles. One has been taught to play the role of the exploiter, one has been taught to play the role of the exploited. But in playing these respective roles, both of them are getting equally exploited. Now, that's very hard for feminists to swallow, because the narrative feeds on terming someone as the exploiter. I too agree that someone is the exploiter, but the name of the exploiter is ignorance, spiritual ignorance. So if you really want to liberate women, feminism is hardly the way, spirituality is the way.
Because that father, Acharyaji, is 60 and trying so hard to live that image.
Obviously.
60 years.
Obviously, the father is 65 and carrying 10 ailments. And the daughter is 26, 27. Healthy of body, and still the father has to go out to buy the grocery, because in the typical patriarchy the girl is not supposed to step out at odd hours or do some things. Is the father not carrying an unnecessary burden?
Yeah.
And so many other subtle burdens also, that your kids have grown up, they are in their early 20s, you have never talked to them nicely.
Forget about not having talked to them.
Had a funny conversation.
Forget about not having talked to them. No man in his right senses would ever honestly admit that marrying off the daughters nicely is the purpose of his life. But that's what crores of men have been subjugated to. The daughter is born, and out of patriarchal compulsions, this man starts collecting money and dowry and all those things right from day one. This is as much an exploitation of the man as it is of the woman, the daughters.
Yeah.
No? Otherwise, I mean, you speak to any man who takes pleasure in organizing weddings.
And Acharyaji, we need to make a connect between this man and how he trying so bad to live his image is making institutions corrupt. Because if he has to arrange dowry, he'll take bribes somewhere.
Exactly. And all of that, if you see, points towards just one thing.
Ignorance.
Spiritual ignorance. Spiritual ignorance is where all of this is coming from. It has robbed us of the basic normal fun of life. You know? The woman has been turned into a very tasteless kind of specimen.
And when I observe,
Even think of sexual activity. I mean, what pleasure do you get penetrating a corpse? And that's what the woman has been trained to be. If I display pleasure in sexual activity, then I'm a slut. So I better play the corpse on the bed. I won't even admit having an orgasm. Because if I say, I had an orgasm, oh man, she really enjoys it. I'm supposed to enjoy it. I'm the man. She is supposed to be the provider of enjoyment. Just as I am supposed to be the provider of the nest. Those are the respective roles, right? And if she says, no, I am enjoying it every bit as you do, or more than you, then she is robbed of her respect.
I mean, it's so interesting and also disheartening that when I look at my parents, I see that my father, he is badly wanting to chill subconsciously, and my mother, she is badly wanting to work. My mother is feeling that maybe I had the power to earn money, do things on my own, and my father is just too so both are trying to not be their domains, so to say.
Acharya, I have a question that now when it has been established and rather very clear that ascension is not something which is something which is prerogative to only to man. It is for the woman both, and both have equal chances. Then why did the Buddha Sahib had the Sangh, where if both had equal chances, why did he have Sangha where only men were allowed?
Because that's what men need. It's not a commentary on their respective chances. It tells of what suits whom. That kind of monastic life is more suitable to men's liberation. For women's liberation, some other instrument is needed.
Yes, because if they do both want to ascend, they both have their own ways of ascending.
Exactly. They both have to be liberated, but the ways have to be different, sometimes slightly different, sometimes very different.
Right. Thank you. Yes, very valid.
Acharya ji, this process of gendering and binary creation has made manly values and womanly values very bold in our psyche. Can you paint the picture of that person who will be representing or carrying the values of that third or that meta gender, just for the sake of imagination?
No, you know of those values. Anybody carrying those values, anybody upholding, respecting those values, you can think of or imagine.
I mean, you can be feminine, you can be in that domain and also be out of that domain.
Obviously. See, some physical characteristics you will carry, right? You are born sexed. So that will be there. You will have a penis, you will have a vagina, something will be there. But that does not have to necessarily determine what you value.
But this pink versus blue thing won't exist.
Childish.
What are the differences in men's methods of men's liberation? You said monastic life is more suited to men. So what would be more suited to women and why?
See, the way biology has designed the respective bodies, men will find it easier to break stuff because they are harder and stronger. So they can pick up an axe and cut a tree or pick up a hammer and batter something. That's their way, the way of destruction, the way of, therefore, negation. The woman has one important thing in her life, which is that first of all, she carries the baby in the womb and then she breastfeeds. So her way has to be of association. The man's way will be of negation. The man will always be better at destroying, and if he is spiritual, he will destroy falseness. Niti is what he will be extremely good at. The woman would need a symbol to associate herself with. Association comes biologically, naturally to her. The man can be a recluse, the man can be a loner, man can sit in his cave and meditate and do all those things. They are more suited. The woman needs to have a force, a symbol, something powerful enough in her vicinity to identify with. And that identification in the case of the woman is much more purer and quite unconditional. It's not that way with men. When women get devoted, they get devoted to a fault. They don't even want to then listen to anything wrong or vituperative. So that's the difference. Though again, even this is a bit of a stereotype, because the tendency to associate or dissociate is not necessarily physical. So you may have women who find the route of negation more suited, and you may have men who might find the route of association more apt. But that's a game of Maya. The woman will need to trust. If you are associating with somebody, you can never be 200% sure, but trust comes a bit naturally to her. So she trusts. But if you trust, then you are exposing yourself to exploitation. Man cannot trust that easily. Man will have 10 questions to ask. But if you can't trust easily, then you are placing your ego above many other things. You are saying, I will trust, I will decide, I will be the decision maker. If I think something is right, I'll trust it. If I don't think it's right, I won't trust it. So that's the thing with both of them, and both are in a precarious situation. The woman is probably in more of a bad situation, because her deliverance is more dependent on the environment. Somebody who can show the light, somebody who is dependable, and somebody who she can identify with without running the risk of being subjugated or exploited. This kind of an external person or point is not only difficult to get, but such a happening is also very accidental and unpredictable. You cannot always depend on the presence of a saint in your life. The saint may or may not occur. In the case of the man, the movement is not so much dependent on external favorable circumstances. If he feels filled up with resentment and frustration, he can pick up the axe or the hammer and attack his chains. The woman would want to be, please hear it rightly, I don't want to say that she cannot lead, but the woman would want to be led. She is a more natural follower. And that does not place her in an inferior situation. That in fact places her leader in a very responsible situation. Her leader has been gifted with the responsibility and the opportunity to lead her to the right place. So she depends on somebody to lead her, somebody she can associate herself with, somebody she can trust more or less unconditionally. Unfortunately, if the state of the society is bad, then such a person or an institution is difficult to come by. And then the woman suffers a lot, and with her the man, obviously.
So when you say association, it refers to a person or an institution or maybe even a book or something?
Anything, just anything.
So something that's...
It could even refer to education. So that's why I said institution. It could even mean the right school or the right college.
So just, does it mean something that's done in a group? Or not necessarily?
It could even be a group, a set of persons to, Men corrupt women and then suffer as a consequence. Women remain womanly and suffer. See, the way biology has designed the respective bodies, men will find it easier to break stuff because they are harder and stronger. The woman has one important thing in her life, which is that first of all she carries a baby in the womb and then she breastfeeds. So her way has to be of association. The man's way will be of negation. If we suffer in our relationships with women, I repeat, we are just paying for the sins of history. All I want you to appreciate is that you cannot have corruption on just one side. Instead of blaming the woman, put your energy in your own betterment, and that will make you more appreciative and more compassionate, and you'll be able to do better things with yourself and also with the women.